Hey everybody, this is Ben Hanson from MinnMax, and I'm here with...
Matt Bertz.
Hey, welcome back, Matt Bertz.
Thank you.
Nice to be at the table again with you.
Absolutely.
Where are you at these days?
I'm at a research consulting group called Magid, M-A-G-I-D.
There we go.
Yeah.
But you used to be the managing editor at Game Informer.
Yes, I did.
And while we were there in 2011, we went on a bizarre cover story for Rainbow Six Patriots.
Yes.
You wrote the cover story.
I did.
The game was canceled. You might remember this.
Yeah.
And there was a lot to unpack, and we know a lot about that game, and it'd be fun just to look back on what's going on with Rainbow Six Patriots.
Yeah, I was really excited for this game. You know, it had been a long time since Rainbow Six had done anything. Rainbow Six Vegas 2, what was it, 4 or 5 years?
2008, I think.
Yeah. So it had been a while. So
Right.
I was stoked for this, and it was a bold decision to the direction they went narratively.
Oh, for sure. We'll unpack all that stuff, but let's take another look at the trailers while we're at it here.
All right, let's do it.
Peggy 18.
This is a really weird video, Bertz. Do you remember Kotaku had the test gameplay footage?
Yep.
And so
I'm
this
David
forced
Sears,
this.
Creative Director for Rainbow Six Patriots here at Ubisoft Montreal. We have reason to believe someone may leak our preliminary target gameplay footage for Rainbow Six Patriots.
He's so pissed.
This gives us the opportunity to actually start a communication with you guys much, much earlier. So we're taking the
Opportunity.
initiative and we're going to show you the target gameplay footage in its entirety here today. I hope you enjoy the viewing.
The viewing.
Ubisoft loved to leak back then. I mean, they still do to a certain degree.
For sure.
It's hard to keep that stuff.
Especially
under
with
lock and
teams
key,
the
but-
size of Ubisoft teams.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this video is what we saw on the cover story trip, from what I recall.
Yep.
Do you remember if it was a video or if it was them playing it live?
I think this part was the video, and then we saw live gameplay later.
Okay.
Identifying themselves as the true Patriots. The video showed.
You know that wife walk.
Blow it out.
It's like the heavy rain
You know what I
section
wish
of the
for.
game.
100%. And in the interviews,
Oh, the baby's
David Sears even talked about, who's the creative director there, he talked about Heavy Rain as an inspiration.
Yeah.
Wishes do come true.
How weird.
It's probably Gail from next door. Hold that thought.
This is too much. I wonder if men made this scene.
Yeah,
Can't tell.
Yeah, I know. I mean, she's a new mom. That like.
Cindy! Get away from her! On the floor!
Rise and shine. Happy birthday, by the way.
It's the crying from PT, I think.
Very nice place you've got here. You really did cash in on everyone else getting foreclosed, didn't you? Today you're gonna make up for that.
It's like Voss from Far Cry 3.
Oh, I mean, after he became like a standout hit at E3, I think that was just like the target
Maybe.
villain.
Exactly what
Well,
we
this-
say.
Well, this would have been
we will
before
feel
they even
just
revealed Far Cry 3? 2011?
Was it?
Your kid,
I don't,
too.
The Far Cry timeline.
I think it's 2012 for
Is
Far
it
Cry.
12?
I think
Come
so.
So-
in with us.
E3
no matter
this
what
year?
happens,
Yeah.
you get yourself to Times Square. Tell Treadway Subject 4 is activated.
Traffic's backed up on the bridge. We're not gonna make it in time.
Stick to the playbook. Treadway's got this operation tuned like a Swiss watch. Listen, you hold this down until Times Square, or your family gets a one-way ticket to the hereafter.
Yeah, and so that was another inspiration from Heavy Rain, was just like making awkward use of the controller, so you actually had to hold this down the entire time, which is a cool idea.
Yeah.
Get clear of the van! You better get yourself to Times Square. The bomb is armed! The van is on fire! Take cover!
What a way to start your day, huh?
Jesus. Okay, so switching perspectives was a big thing in this game's campaign.
Yep.
And like going back and listening to interviews as well, like the creators talk about like, oh, in the original novel of Rainbow Six, like they show multiple perspectives. We wanted to kind of harken back to that original idea of showing like where the terrorists are coming from, where every person's coming from in the situation.
Left lane, running past blue pickup. Done. Center lane, coming out of black sedan. Fire! Got him. 12 meters down from sedan, right lane, behind that red SUV. Down. True Patriots look insane, but the proxy bomber's on the move. Proceed
So
to street
weird.
level and intercept the bomber.
That's the quietest New York City's ever looked.
Hostiles ahead. Take them out.
Engaging.
Third person, very interesting.
Yep, that was a classic Rainbow Six thing. Being able to switch between the two.
Red lane. Anyone have eyes on the bomb? NYPD is firing on the bomber. If they kill him, everybody on this bridge is going to be blown sky high. Engage NYPD immediately. Are you ordering friendly fire? No time to radio now. Take the shot.
So that is the new Rainbow Six commander. Wolf, I think, was his name.
Yep.
And he was kind of a rogue operator.
James Wolfe, yeah, so he's leading Team Rainbow, and he had a tough upbringing in Oakland with the idea. And so you're going to be playing primarily as Mark, who's like, hey, I'm from Montana, I'm just a country kid. And so you kind of got to choose Mark's path, and whether or not you agreed with Wolf's choices throughout the
Yeah.
campaign here.
And the way they like to describe those choices, if I remember correctly, is like from bad to worse choices. You don't have like a clear good choice in the game.
Right. And what they're playing with, too, is just that idea that, like, well, the terrorists in this game are homegrown terrorists, so they look like civilians. So from the civilians' point of view, in some ways, like, Team Rainbow are the bad guys, because they're the men in black that are coming through with guns and shooting people that also look like civilians, right?
Yep.
Nice and easy.
Stop where you are.
Don't move. We're here to help.
No, they're gonna kill me.
It's gonna be all right.
We need you to trust us. I don't want to die. Bomb squad is 3 minutes out.
And so they said, like, you will have the choice of shooting civilians, and it won't be a game over. It'll keep continuing.
Yeah.
Unlike Call of Duty Modern Warfare this year. There's a lot of weird Call of Duty comparisons to make here.
There are.
Squad arrives.
Remote detonator. This is bad. There's more than 100 people still in the kill radius.
We're out of time. I'm sorry.
Over here now. No, hey, no, don't do this. No.
What did you do?
What I had to do.
Yikes.
We hope you enjoyed the viewing of Rainbow Six
Hope you
Patriots
enjoyed it.
target gameplay footage. If you want to know more, check out our website.
I bet that URL is not active anymore. That is just the crazy thing, obviously, is like looking at this game, and it eventually kind of sort of was turned into Siege, right? Or at least taking like the multiplayer
Kind
aspects,
of.
kind of rebuilt some of the tech. Because a big thing here is it's made it the Anvil engine, which is
Yep.
like the Assassin's Creed engine. And like going back and reading your cover story, like that was a big focus. Like it took years to get that engine to be functioning first person as a shooter, right?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons that ultimately this game kind of went under. I think there was a lot of technical struggles with that engine from what people had said after they left.
Okay.
So, I mean, you know, we saw it with EA when they tried to, you know, they politely asked BioWare to use the Frostbite engine, which is a Ferrari for first-person shooters, but it had none of the capabilities to do role-playing games.
And that's
So-
why Dragon Age Inquisition was brutal.
Yeah,
But
so-
also on the Army of Two Devils cartel trip, they also used Frostbite. Remember? And that was a
Yeah.
big thing. Is like, oh, we got to adapt it. And that's a ton of technical work.
Yeah, it is. It's tricky ask for people, you know, because I think the other Rainbow Six games were on Unreal Engine.
Right, right. And yeah, it's crazy just knowing eventually now the success of Siege and looking back and just how hard they were focusing on story. Where I remember
Yeah.
David Sears, he said something like, he was like, well, you know, I mean, with the Vegas games, like I could not tell you what that story is. And like we really want to have an impact here, and we're sick of shooting Nazis. We want to have a real modern threat, and the best way to do that right now is to have homegrown terrorists.
Yeah, I mean, it's no one would think twice if that was a book or if that was
Right.
a movie or a television show, but the fact that you're playing in, you know, like No Russian is a really good example of, you know, like it really upset people that you could just shoot innocent civilians in that experience. And this is going to be an entire game where like a third of it you're going to be playing from the perspective of people trying to do that.
As Americans. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's insane. And so, there's a quote in your cover story, which is very interesting, where David Sears says, like, why can't a game be smarter? Why can't a game embrace issues? Like, they were leaning so heavily into that, like, who are the real terrorists? Maybe Rainbow Six, from a certain point of view, they are technically terrorists,
Yeah.
right?
The
They're
world
well
is gray. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And just like to court that so much. Because like even in interviews, they were talking about like, we're expecting to be invited on Fox News when this game
Yep.
comes out. Like we know this is going to be a big deal. And like as you lay out in your cover story, I mean, in 2011, it was still very much like the rise of the Tea Party, a lot of unrest. And so they were couching it like, well, politically, it could be from any perspective because a part of it is also they're angry at the fat cats on Wall Street, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I really feel like, you know, we've seen where the industry has gone, and Ubisoft as well the last, you know, 6-7 years, where people want to have their cake and eat it too when it comes to like having a politically charged setting, but not say anything specifically about the
Call of Duty,
circumstances.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah, Call of Duty does it. You know, Far Cry 5 did it. There's a lot
Exactly,
of games
same company, yeah.
that I understand it. You know, you're courting, it's a business and they're trying to court the largest possible audience for the game, and gamers come from all sorts of political backgrounds. So you want it to do that, but at the same time, you're really kneecapping your narrative directors, I feel like, who want to tell a story that could rival that of a Hollywood film.
Yeah, for sure. So the game was canceled. On the Game Informer Show podcast in 2017, interviewed Richard Rouse, who, what was his title on the game?
He was the narrative director.
Narrative director. Okay. And he was saying, like, it was above my head. I don't really know, ultimately, to this day, how and why the game was canceled. Do you have any more insight into just what happened to Patriots?
Oh, it sounds like it was kind of, I mean, developing games is hard, and the project is on fire the whole time. It's like landing a plane that's on fire, is the way a lot of developers like to explain it. But they decided midway through the game and after we were there for the cover story to change the creative leadership. So David Sears and Richard Rouse and some other people were let go, and they brought in a new team to take over the project. And then months later, they decided that wasn't the way to go either. And then they canceled the game outright. And they kept, I know Simon LaRouche was the head of the multiplayer experience for Rainbow Six Patriots, and he ended up being the game director for Siege. So there were people that, you know, they took the good parts of the multiplayer, which is very different from Siege. If you remember, it was way more like Call of Duty with a lobby.
Which is insane because, yeah, they literally had a space that they called HQ, which then Call of Duty World War II eventually also had the HQ like social space, right? Where it's like, oh, instead of lobbies, you'll be able to wander around, plan out your routes.
See other people's costumes or, you know, gear and stuff like that.
Which is a pretty cool idea still.
It had a firing range.
Well, beyond it also had like a hologram area where it's like kind of the red look that they're showing there.
Yep.
You could actually like walk around the maps just by yourself, and it all had that kind of hologram thing, and you could mark places and locations like, oh, this is a good spot for this.
Yep.
Let's make this a central point, and then you could share that online. So like if you're the commander in the game, then you could be like, all right, rally at point B, which I set in the hologram version of the map when we were in the HQ lobby.
Yep.
It's really cool ideas.
And you know, that definitely ended up being distilled into like the loading menu of Rainbow Six Siege, where you can still like ping where you guys want to breach.
Sure. Yeah,
you know,
I guess so.
It did carry over a little bit. But they also had, do you remember their plans? Like they were going to have a crazy stat tracking system that was going to be available via the PC, where you could like track everything, you know, and I love that kind of stuff. That's why I've always liked the Battlefield series, just seeing like how effective am I with this weapon versus that weapon. And
well, I remember they had, instead of just showing the percentage of like, hey, this is how accurate you are, it would show like every hit.
Yeah.
And like exactly where you hit on the target, which is, has any game done that? I would love to see that. That's such a fun idea, right?
Yeah, it would be great. You get a lot of netcode complaints when you start showing that stuff.
That could be. And also just the idea of like the commanders and followers. So the commander, so he'd be able to see like a vision cone on the map of everybody else, and you'd be able to choose your commander.
You could time, you know, entrances. You could know when everybody was in place without needing verbal cues, which, you know, is always a challenge with cooperation on multiplayer shooters.
Yeah.
So letting the guy actually see what everybody else is doing, go, okay, everybody's in position, go.
Right.
That would be really cool.
It's so weird, though, thinking about like Ubisoft now, and it's like, okay, we were going so hard on story, scrapped it, went hard on multiplayer, and now Siege is a gigantic success. So what's the takeaway for the publisher, right? Like, why ever try and go for this type of story again?
Yeah, I don't know. I really wish we knew the exact reasons. Like what I'm sure there's risk factors with the narrative. Maybe the mission designs weren't great. The engine was still causing problems. There's a lot of decision-making factors that probably went into the final call to cancel the game. But I would love to know. And, you know, they haven't walked away from single player at all. You know, you look at what they did with Ghost Recon with Wildlands and, you know, to a lesser extent Breakpoint. You know, they reinvented the cooperative campaign experience.
Yeah, for sure. David Sears, who was the creative director on this game, he eventually went on to Compulsion Games and he worked on like We Happy Few.
Yeah.
And so now he's a Microsoft employee, which is insane because he has an interesting history in the industry. He was at SOCOM, SOCOM 1 and 2.
Interactive, yeah.
Yep. And then he was also, I Have No Mouth, But I Must Scream.
Yeah, that's right.
That
he
old
was
adventure
attached
game.
to that. Yeah.
And he said some very controversial things. Like outside of any cover story I went on, it was one of those like, Jesus Christ, man. Like you have a quote in that cover story where he talks about that home invasion sequence.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember this? He said, quote, "Then what he experiences, the player character, is tantamount to home invasion and emotional rape."
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, there's the developer's quote saying there's emotional rape for this protagonist. Like, that is so bizarre for the game industry.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen people temper their language, especially over the last, 5 to 7 years. I think it's a different industry now than it was then.
Right.
I mean, whenever you look back at stuff, you're always like, oh, you couldn't have got away with that these days.
Oh, God, yeah. They released one more trailer for this, I think showing off the bad guy's name. Hey, from a certain point of view, the bad guy.
Treadway?
This is the day we've been waiting for. Years of training, years of sacrifice. This is for the jobs you streamlined, the debts you collected. This is for the homes you foreclosed on, the bailouts you took. We are the true patriots. It's time for a new balance of power. You may not answer to the government, but you will answer to us. Get him up.
Quite the entrance.
Hey, he really did it. 2013. I mean, they announced this early, too. I guess they kind of, in that era of the game industry, they would wait a couple years even before the game was actually released and stuff. But didn't eventually happen. Bertz, you had a weird story with your cover story.
Yeah, this is the weirdest thing I think that happened when I worked at Game Informer.
Yeah.
So there apparently was a disgruntled former soldier who was stationed at a base in Georgia, I believe, who read the article. And, if you look back at that intro, I just talked about how fractured American society was at that time with the Tea Party and Occupy Wall Street and the foreclosures and the bailouts and all this sort of stuff that was happening.
Yeah.
And, like the just negativity that's pervasive in news media. And he kind of used that as a recruiting tool to get people to kind of join his domestic terrorist group.
Like, he brought the magazine around.
Yeah, he brought the magazine around and see what people thought of reading that intro. And he eventually recruited a bunch of guys, and one guy went to his wife and said, I'm going to join this group. And she was like, no, you're not. That's insane. And he went back and told them, yeah, I'm not going to join. And I guess he thought he had to kill those two. So he's serving a life term in prison right now.
How does that make you feel?
I don't know. I mean, it's surreal, I think is the
Did you
word.
lose sleep over it? Was it traumatic when that came out?
I don't know if it was traumatic to me. It really, you think a lot about it. And, I don't think I wrote anything that was like,
go kill people.
Yeah, it wasn't. It wasn't a manifesto by any stretch of the imagination. I was setting up the political context for someone making a game like Rainbow Six Patriots.
Right.
And I think it did that, but I never thought somebody would use it for that.
And then it was some other site or newspaper wrote an article.
Richard Rouse, the narrative director, sent me a Facebook message and was like, "Did you see this?" And it was like a newscast from Georgia, and it was like, "Wait, what?" And she was holding the magazine and talking about they use this Game Informer magazine to recruit terrorists. Like, that is so bizarre.
Yeah, no, a lot of people were looking forward to it. Like, it's still talked about as like, what happened to Patriots? When are we going to get another game like Patriots? And I feel like Modern Warfare, with the first 2 levels they were showing for the reboot here, they were inching closer to that territory than I've seen. But then they have the message of, oh, no, it's not a political game. Please don't think it's a political game because we don't mention Donald Trump directly. Therefore, it's not a political game. What's kind of their angle, which is confusing in so many different ways. But, like, why do you think people still talk about this game?
I think it's because it was, I mean, whether or not they stuck the landing, it will be up for debate because we'll never see the game. But, it was a brave narrative approach. There's no doubt that it was very brave. And tackling these kind of subjects in an interactive medium is, for some people, scary. And, I was really proud of Ubisoft to, explore this direction. And I understand, I guess, why they wouldn't go that way. But I'm really hoping with, the democratization of, game development tools, there's going to be more smaller teams that are able to take risks like this that a big corporation won't.
Right. And Ubisoft is such a huge company. But in that interview with Richard Rouse, where we're reflecting on, the lessons from Patriots and stuff, he's like, well, I think part of it was that, Ubisoft not being an American company, I think it did not seem as insane to them and maybe as dangerous to them to be like, oh, yeah, just about homegrown terrorists in America. Here's a story. I'm sure it was very tense when they had to make those calls to actually make it. But at the same time, it's like that was part of the reason why this maybe happened. It's like, oh, it's a French company. It's a little bit removed, right?
Yeah. And they're tricky to pull off. I mean, whenever you're dealing with politics, it's tough, but there's a lot of this exploration of the human condition that I feel like is a lot of room to grow in the interactive space, and I'm excited for the next 10, 15 years to see more people do it.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think we'll ever see a narrative Rainbow Six again?
I hope so. I mean, we're going to get PvE with Quarantine, which I'm excited about.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about Quarantine.
I like the breach and clear, like ticking time bomb sort of scenarios that the Patriots or the Rainbow Six games had. Like I loved Vegas. It was, and cooperatively, it was great to try to coordinate with your friends and blow it sometimes, succeed other times. I think there's a lot of room there to make a good experience still. So I hope they do one.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, Bertz, thanks for swinging by. I appreciate it, man.
Problem.
And thank you for watching. Let's take another look at that. I believe these series are called. Let us know in the comments what you want us to take a look at one more time in the future. Thanks, everybody. From in-depth game club discussions with the community to live streams every single week, weekly podcasts, exclusive videos, everything under the sun is at patreon.com/MinnMax2Ns. Check it out, everybody.